The moment Manny Pacquiao heard what had happened to his daughter at school, everything else faded away. The boxing legend had faced countless challengers in the ring, but nothing prepared him for the call he received that afternoon. His 12-year-old daughter, Queenie, had been humiliated in front of her entire class by her teacher, Miss Reynolds. The teacher had mocked Queenie's accent, labeled her just another poor Filipino trying to fit in, and even went so far as to say she'd never amount to anything, regardless of who her father was. What the teacher didn't realize was that she had just provoked one of the most determined men in the world, and Manny's response wouldn't come in the form of punches. It would spark changes that would go far beyond his daughter and affect the entire school system. If you're watching this, chances are you know the pain of seeing someone you love mistreated. That helpless anger, that strong urge to do something. If this story strikes a chord, hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful, true stories of courage and resilience. And share your experience in the comments. Have you ever stood up for someone who was being treated unfairly? Now here's how Manny Pacquiao dealt with this situation and left everyone stunned. It all began on a regular Tuesday. Queenie had only been enrolled at Westridge Private Academy for 3 months. Despite being the daughter of a world-famous athlete and senator, she was modest and hard-working. She never flaunted her background or her father's name. In fact, many of her peers didn't even know who her dad was. Queenie wanted to be recognized for her own accomplishments, not her family's reputation. She was especially strong in math and science, often staying after school to tutor classmates who needed help. Most teachers valued her efforts and kind spirit, all except Ms. Reynolds. Ms. Reynolds, the English literature teacher, was known for her rigid standards and stern approach. She had been teaching at Westridge for over 15 years and was proud of the students she had helped shape, but behind her professional facade was a deep bias, particularly against students she believed didn't belong in prestigious schools. She came from old money and often made subtle remarks about scholarship students or those from less traditional backgrounds. With Queenie, her dislike wasn't subtle. She frowned when Queenie spoke, mocked her accent, and routinely criticized her work and class participation. Queenie, trying to stay composed, worked even harder in Ms. Reynolds' class. She practiced her pronunciation at home and never told her parents about how she was being treated. "I can manage this," she reminded herself each morning. Manny and his wife Jinky had raised their children to be strong and self-reliant, qualities Queenie held close. But even resilience has its breaking point. And that Tuesday, Queenie reached hers. During class, while discussing a novel, Ms. Reynolds called on Queenie to read a passage aloud. Barely 2 sentences in, the teacher interrupted. "Stop, stop, stop," she sighed dramatically. "I can hardly understand what you're saying with that accent." The classroom fell silent. 25 students turned toward Queenie, who froze in place, her cheeks burning with shame. Ms. Reynolds wasn't finished. She walked deliberately to Queenie's desk, the sound of her heels echoing in the room. "I don't understand why students like you are even admitted to this school," she said coldly. "Your father might be good at punching people for money, but this place is for learning and culture." Some students snickered, others looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Queenie fought back the tears welling in her eyes. She refused to let the teacher see her cry. Leaning in, the teacher added under her breath, but loud enough for nearby students to hear, "Money can buy a uniform, but it can't buy class." Then the bell rang, finally ending the most humiliating 45 minutes of Queenie's life. With shaking hands, she grabbed her things and rushed out. In the restroom, the tears finally came. She thought about calling her parents, but stopped herself. Her father was preparing for a major Senate speech, and her mother was busy organizing a charity event. They had responsibilities, and Queenie didn't want to add to them. But as she washed her face and looked in the mirror, something changed. Her father had always taught her, respect is earned, but disrespect should never be ignored. Gathering herself, she dried her face and reached for her phone. Her father needed to hear what had happened. Manny Pacquiao was in a meeting when his phone vibrated with Queenie's message. He always kept it nearby when his kids were at school, a habit formed during years of training camps and long travel. The message was short. "Dad, can we talk after school? Something happened." The words weren't alarming on their own, but Manny knew his daughter. She never messaged during school unless something was seriously wrong. He stepped out of the meeting and called her right away. Queenie answered. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the slight quiver. He knew she had been crying. As she told him what happened, a storm of emotions rushed through him: sadness, anger, and a powerful urge to protect his daughter. "I'll pick you up after school," he said, his voice steady but serious. Manny Pacquiao had endured poverty, discrimination, and years of being underestimated on his rise from the streets of General Santos City to global fame. He had been mocked for his size, his accent, and his humble roots, but he overcame it all through perseverance and heart. Now, his daughter was facing similar cruelty, and he wasn't going to let it stand. He immediately canceled the rest of his day's appointments. His security team noticed the shift in his mood. The cheerful Manny was gone, replaced by the focused intensity they usually saw only before a major fight. No one asked questions. When Manny arrived at Westridge Academy later that day, he didn't come as a celebrity or a senator. He came as a father. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a button-up shirt, and drove an ordinary car, not one of his high-end vehicles. He wasn't there to cause a scene or use his status to intimidate anyone. That wasn't his approach. Waiting in the parking lot for the last bell to ring, Manny thought carefully about how to respond. His first instinct was anger, to confront the teacher directly and demand her firing, but years in the spotlight had taught him the importance of patience and strategy. Winning in the ring took more than strength. It took control and planning. This situation was no different. The bell rang. Students began filing out of the building. Manny saw Queenie right away. Even from a distance, he could tell she was different. Shoulders hunched, head down, lacking her usual confidence. It broke his heart. When she spotted him, her eyes widened. She had expected a driver, not her father himself. She hurried over and fell into his arms. "You came," she whispered. "Always," he replied, holding her tightly. They stayed like that for a moment before he pulled back gently and looked into her eyes. "Let's go talk to your principal." Queenie nodded, drawing strength from her father's quiet determination. Principal Warner was not expecting Manny Pacquiao to walk into his office that afternoon. He nearly spilled his coffee when his secretary announced the unexpected guest. Warner had always taken pride in leading a school that appealed to high-profile families, celebrities, public figures, and prominent professionals. Hosting the children of such individuals boosted Westridge Academy's reputation, and more importantly, its financial backing. But one look at Manny Pacquiao's face told him this visit wasn't about a donation. "Mr. Pacquiao, what a surprise," Warner said, extending his hand while motioning to the chairs in front of his desk. "What brings you in today?" "My daughter has something she needs to share," Manny replied, his tone steady and calm. He placed a reassuring hand on Queenie's shoulder. Warner's smile faded slightly as he turned his attention to the young girl. Over the next few minutes, Queenie calmly explained what had occurred in Ms. Reynolds' classroom. She didn't exaggerate or dramatize. She simply described the events as they happened, occasionally glancing at her father for support. When she finished, silence filled the room. Warner cleared his throat. "I understand," he said carefully. "Ms. Reynolds is one of our most experienced educators. I'm sure there's been some sort of misunderstanding." Manny said nothing, his gaze fixed on the principal. It was clear Warner was hoping to minimize the issue, perhaps to protect the school's image or avoid taking action against a veteran teacher. "There's no misunderstanding," Queenie said softly but firmly. "It's not just me. She treats other students the same way, especially those who aren't from wealthy American families." Warner shifted uneasily in his seat, visibly unsettled by the direction of the conversation. "Well, I will certainly speak with Miss Reynolds. We take matters like this seriously at Westridge," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. Manny leaned forward slightly, his eyes still locked on Warner. "I don't think you fully understand," he said. "My daughter was publicly humiliated by someone meant to guide and inspire her. This isn't just about accusations. This is about basic human dignity and respect. Values I assumed this school upheld." Warner looked momentarily stunned. Perhaps he had expected outrage or a threat to withdraw Queenie from school. Instead, he was confronted with a composed, articulate father advocating for his child with clarity and purpose. "Of course, Mr. Pacquiao," Warner replied. "I assure you we will look into this thoroughly." Manny nodded, though it was clear vague assurances would not suffice. "I'd like to offer a solution," he said. Warner raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. What followed would not only impact Queenie's experience, it would begin to reshape the school's culture. I want to establish an anti-bullying and cultural sensitivity program here at Westridge, Manny said, catching both Warner and Queenie off guard. I will personally fund it. Warner blinked, trying to absorb the unexpected offer. That's very generous of you, Mr. Pacquiao, but I'm not sure. Manny raised a hand gently to cut him off. This isn't just about Queenie. It's about every student who has ever been made to feel small or excluded because of where they come from. The program would include required training for all faculty, regular student workshops, and a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination. Warner's mind was racing. Refusing such a proposal, especially from someone of Pacquiao's stature, would reflect poorly. Yet accepting it meant acknowledging there was a problem at Westridge, something the Board of Trustees would likely resist. This is a significant proposal, he said cautiously. I'd have to consult the board before moving forward. Manny nodded. He had expected as much. I understand how institutions work. But while you're discussing it, I think it's only appropriate that Ms. Reynolds be suspended during the investigation. Warner's expression stiffened. Suspended? That's a serious measure, Mr. Pacquiao. We have policies for these situations. So do I, Manny responded, still composed, but now with a sharper edge in his voice. Mine involve contacting the parents of other affected students. I believe many of them would want to know what happened today. I also imagine the media would find it compelling how one of the country's top private schools permits teachers to mistreat students based on their ethnicity. He wasn't threatening, he was stating facts. Warner swallowed hard. The implications hung thick in the air. I understand, he finally said. Ms. Reynolds will be placed on administrative leave while we investigate. I'll call an emergency board meeting to review your proposal. Manny gave a small nod, seemingly satisfied. Thank you. I appreciate your cooperation. He turned to Queenie, who looked at him with admiration. She had expected him to be upset, maybe to demand the teacher's dismissal. Instead, he had chosen to channel the moment into something larger, something meaningful. As they exited the office, Queenie quietly took her father's hand. Dad, that was incredible, she whispered. Manny gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Standing up for what's right doesn't always mean fighting, he said. Sometimes it means creating change. As they walked through the school hallways, a few students and teachers paused, surprised to see the world-famous boxer. But Manny paid them no mind. His focus was solely on his daughter. News of the meeting spread rapidly across Westridge Academy. By the next morning, everyone knew Miss Reynolds had been suspended and that Manny Pacquiao had intervened personally. Reactions were mixed. Some staff members defended their colleague, closing ranks. But the culture at Westridge had already begun to shift. Others who had long felt uneasy about Ms. Reynolds' conduct but had remained silent finally felt a sense of relief. Someone had taken a stand. Among the students, Queenie quickly became the center of attention. Some approached her to share their own experiences with Ms. Reynolds. Others expressed regret for not supporting her during class. A few even admitted they had laughed at the teacher's remarks out of fear they might become targets themselves. Through it all, Queenie stayed composed, neither seeking pity nor holding grudges. As promised, Principal Warner scheduled a meeting with the Board of Trustees that same week. Manny attended with both his attorney and an education consultant who specialized in diversity and inclusion. At first, the board was hesitant to embrace such a sweeping proposal. We've never had discrimination problems at Westridge, one trustee remarked. Manny responded calmly but firmly, with all due respect, just because no one has reported it doesn't mean it hasn't happened. He then presented a series of testimonials collected from current and former students, all detailing personal experiences with bias and prejudice at the school. The evidence was thorough and undeniable. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, the board had unanimously approved Manny's plan. The Pacquiao Cultural Respect Initiative would take effect immediately, funded by a generous donation from Manny himself. The program included regular staff training, curriculum revisions to report broader perspectives, and a new system for students to report discriminatory behavior. In addition, the school would establish a scholarship fund specifically for students from underrepresented communities. This wasn't just a win for Queenie, it marked a shift for the entire school. That evening, when Manny called to share the news, Queenie couldn't hold back her tears. "You didn't just help me," she said, voice shaking. "You helped everyone." In the following weeks, change became visible at Westridge Academy. Posters promoting the new initiative lined the hallways, and workshops for staff and students got underway. After an investigation confirmed Queenie's account and uncovered several more complaints, Ms. Reynolds was asked to resign. She departed quietly, without a public statement, though it was rumored she had accepted a role at another prominent school across the country. Principal Warner, seemingly aware of the changing tide, became an outspoken advocate of the initiative. He spoke at length to parents, emphasizing the school's renewed dedication to inclusion. Some skeptics noted the timing of his support, which coincided with a sizable donation to the school's endowment. Still, few could deny the tangible improvements taking place. The most profound transformation, however, occurred within Queenie herself. What might have broken her instead became a source of empowerment. She spoke during the school's first assembly, introducing the new program, sharing her experience and urging others to take a stand against discrimination. Her voice was steady as she addressed the crowd. "My father taught me that our value isn't defined by others' opinions of us," she said. "It's defined by what we do and how we treat others." The applause was overwhelming. Students who once overlooked her now sought her friendship. Teachers who had written her off as just another celebrity's daughter came to recognize her intellect and resilience. Through it all, Queenie remained humble and hardworking. But now, she carried herself with a renewed sense of self-worth, one rooted in confidence and purpose. News of the events at Westridge eventually reached the media, though not in sensational fashion. There were no splashy headlines about teacher misconduct or famous parents taking legal action. Instead, education publications and local news outlets highlighted the launch of a groundbreaking anti-discrimination program at one of the country's top private schools. Manny declined interviews about the incident itself, choosing instead to spotlight the initiative and its wider significance. "This isn't about one teacher or one student," he told reporters. "It's about building an environment where every child feels seen and respected." His response reflected the values of a man who had risen from poverty to become not only a world champion, but also a respected philanthropist and public figure. The effects of Manny's actions extended well beyond Westridge. Other schools in the region, perhaps hoping to avoid similar challenges, began implementing their own cultural sensitivity programs. Parents grew more vocal about their expectations for how schools should treat their children. Even the school that had hired Miss Reynolds quietly announced a review of its policies on classroom conduct and cultural awareness. No one could have anticipated this ripple effect when Queenie sent that text message to her father just weeks earlier. For Manny, the experience only reaffirmed a belief he had always held, that true strength isn't about physical power, but about using one's influence to defend those who cannot defend themselves. 6 months after the incident, Westridge Academy hosted a formal event to mark the official launch of the Pacquiao Cultural Respect Initiative. The auditorium was filled with students, educators, parents, and media. Manny sat in the front row, beaming with pride as Queenie stepped onto the stage to open the program. The timid girl who once called him in distress had grown into a confident young woman, now speaking with conviction about respect and inclusion. "When I was shamed in class that day, I felt powerless," she said, her voice clear and strong. "But my father reminded me that we're never powerless when we choose to stand up for what's right." He spoke about how the experience had opened her eyes to how others were treated and how it had shaped her sense of responsibility. As she continued, Manny found himself reflecting on his own journey. He had grown up in deep poverty, sleeping on the streets of General Santos City. He had faced hunger, discrimination, and despair. Boxing had been his way out, a path to security for himself and his family. But over time, he came to understand that real success isn't defined by titles or wealth. It's defined by the difference you make in the lives of others. Looking at his daughter now, captivating the room with her wisdom and compassion, he realized this moment was his proudest achievement. Not the championships in 8 weight classes, not the years in public office, but raising a daughter who understood the importance of standing up for others. When Queenie finished speaking, the room erupted into a standing ovation. She smiled, thanked the audience, and introduced her father. Manny walked on stage, embraced his daughter, and took the microphone. He spoke briefly, expressing gratitude to the school for its support and commitment to progress. "What happened to my daughter was unfortunate," he said. "But what truly matters is how we responded." He emphasized the importance of transforming painful moments into opportunities for growth and progress. He didn't name Ms. Reynolds or revisit the incident's difficult details. Instead, he focused on the future, on how the new program would help generations of students. It was a demonstration of dignity and restraint from a man who had every reason to be angry. The event concluded with the unveiling of a plaque that would be displayed in the school's main hallway. It read, "The Pacquiao Cultural Respect Initiative, because every student deserves dignity, respect, and the freedom to learn without fear." As cameras captured the moment, Manny stood proudly with his arm around Queenie. The journey from that painful day in Ms. Reynolds' classroom to this celebration had not been easy, but the outcome had surpassed everyone's expectations. What could have ended with a teacher's dismissal had instead sparked a cultural shift across an entire institution. And it began because a father refused to let his daughter's dignity be compromised by anyone under any circumstance. In the months that followed, Queenie's academic performance rose even higher. She was elected student council president and launched a mentoring program for students struggling to adapt to the school's demands. Teachers praised her natural leadership and emotional maturity, traits not taught in classrooms, but clearly nurtured at home. Manny and Jinky watched with quiet pride as their daughter thrived. They had always believed she was special, but seeing her overcome adversity with strength and grace confirmed something deeper. That character is defined not by success, but by how we respond to setbacks. Although media coverage of Queenie's experience eventually faded, its influence only grew. The Pacquiao Cultural Respect Initiative expanded to other schools, eventually becoming a national model for inclusive education. Meanwhile, Ms. Reynolds struggled to find long-term employment. Her history followed her from one school to the next, not because Manny had sought revenge, but because her actions had consequences. In an era that increasingly values accountability, her behavior was no longer tolerated. There was a certain justice to it. A teacher who had once belittled a student for her background now found herself evaluated not by her credentials, but by her conduct. For Queenie, the most powerful takeaway wasn't simply about confronting prejudice or standing up to bullies, though those were important. The deeper lesson was about the quiet strength of dignity. Her father could have used his influence to publicly shame the teacher or pressure the school. He could have removed Queenie and placed her elsewhere. Instead, he chose to confront the issue calmly and constructively, transforming a personal wound into lasting reform. It was a lesson in leadership that no classroom could provide. Years later, when asked about the incident during an interview, Queenie said simply, "My father taught me that how you fight your battles says more about you than whether you win or lose." Manny often looked back on that call, the moment he heard his daughter's shaken voice. His first instinct was anger, and it would have been easy to act on it. But somewhere between that moment and arriving at the school, his mindset shifted. He realized that this wasn't just about defending his child. It was about modeling the right response. How could he teach his daughter to face injustice with integrity if he didn't do the same? That realization shaped his response. Firm but fair, focused on solutions rather than retribution. It was the same mindset that made him a champion in the ring and a respected leader beyond it. Manny's response left an impact far beyond Westridge Academy. Though never sensationalized in the media, the story became a case study in effective parental advocacy. Parent groups cited it as a model for addressing discrimination in schools. Educational experts referenced it when designing cultural awareness training. Even lawmakers pointed to it as an example of how individuals can drive meaningful change without waiting for institutions to act. What made the story compelling wasn't just what Manny did, it was how he did it, with purpose, composure, and a clear goal of building something better. It showed that true influence isn't rooted in status or wealth, but in how those advantages are used to uplift others. Have you ever wondered how you'd respond if someone you love was mistreated? Would you react in anger, seek revenge, or try to turn the experience into something positive? Manny Pacquiao's response to his daughter's humiliation is a powerful example of choosing progress over punishment. Rather than focusing on one teacher, he helped build a program that would serve countless students long into the future. It's a reminder that our biggest trials can lead to our most meaningful contributions. The next time you're faced with injustice, consider not just how to solve the immediate problem, but how you might use it to create lasting change that benefits others too. What's most remarkable about this story isn't just what Manny Pacquiao did, but what he chose not to do. He didn't exploit his fame to shame a teacher. He didn't threaten the school or quietly withdraw his daughter. Instead, he worked collaboratively to address the deeper issue and build something lasting. In doing so, he taught Queedy a lesson more powerful than any lecture. That true strength lies not in the power to tear down, but in the ability to rebuild with integrity. It's a lesson we can all learn from, especially in a world that often rewards volume over wisdom. And perhaps most powerfully, it reminds us that grace, not anger, is what leaves the deepest impression.